Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my esteemed. I'll go with esteemed just because it's always the word that pops into my head, and it's not the word that pops into my head because you're really esteemed. It's just the word that pops into my head because that's always the word that people use. My esteemed.
Hopefully, you're less long-winded and esteemed co-host Connor Rebush, although probably not.
No, never less long-winded than me.
Yeah.
My esteemed co-host Connor Rebush, and we are here to talk about UFC Norfolk and a card that's, I get that it's kind of a weird card just because it's got some really cool fights and then some fights you think are cool until you start looking at them a little more and you're like, oh, that could hurt. That could be not cool. But it's still like a nice mix of a bunch of action fighters, a bunch of veterans, a bunch of people looking to like make a big statement. It'll be a fun card. Like, even if some of the results make you feel a little, kick you right in the nostalgia a little bit, it should be a fun card.
Yeah, I'm sold. I'm completely down for it. Plus, I know these aren't the reasons that anybody else is excited about this card, but it does have both Raphael Assuncao and Shawn Strickland, two of my favorite boring fighters. So.
Yeah, no, I kept watching. I was watching tape on Shawn Strickland, and the only thing running through my mind the whole time is I still don't get this. I still don't get what it is that Connor sees in Shawn Strickland. Like,
yeah,
I don't understand it.
My favorite fighters that will remain uniquely my favorites because most people just are bored by their fights.
I mean, Assuncao, I get. I like Assuncao. He's a good grappler. He's tough to take down. He's hard to outwork, and then he keeps a pace and works behind a boxing game that is just crafty enough to win rounds. And I understand that. Like, that has some appeal to me.
He's just Strickland in the future, dude. Strickland's getting there. He's getting to that point. He's going to be an elite boring fighter someday.
It's a jab that makes you think there's stuff coming behind it, and then there's nothing coming behind it, and then there's some there's some good grappling if he ever gets there. But
we'll talk about it when we get to it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to it. Let's dive right in though, because we got plenty to talk about, and we're already running a little late. And first fight up on this card is a middleweight bout: Darren Stewart, Carl Roberson. What do you think about this?
Tons of very useful footage in Carl Roberson out there.
Oh, yeah. Those 15 seconds of him landing elbows in Dana White's dancing with the fighters.
Dana White's dancing with the stars, which is what Carl Roberson's opponent was doing after he hit him, huh? You know what I'm saying? Stars around the head. Roberson is he seems composed. Like, that is the most you can really gather, that for a lot of first round finishes he has looked remarkably composed in his glory kickboxing performances as well, fighting substantially better kickboxers with a lot more experience, clearly being brought in to lose. And he loses, but he hangs in there. I think that's the big thing you could draw from the 15 seconds of his fight with what was the gentleman's name?
Oh, I don't know.
Ryan
Dana White Tuesday Night Contenders, dude.
Yeah.
Ryan Spawn.
Yeah, the most you could say about that fight is that Spann came out looking like he was determined and really anxious to get a hold of Roberson, and Roberson just kind of let him come in and hit him in the face. He at least looked more calm of the two. I have a feeling that kind of stuff might work against Darren Stewart, like just not flipping out early and just letting him come to him. Of course, that will also mean inviting Darren Stewart into the clinch, but Stewart is not really a phenomenal technician anywhere. He's a physical force. And at middleweight, he's more of a physical force than he was in his light heavyweight bouts. But he's not going to overwhelm somebody with technical brilliance in any phase. And, while we should be concerned about both of these guys gassing out, we know that Darren Stewart does, that he pushes too hard of a pace. I'm gonna take a flyer on Carl Roberson because I don't really a bunch of impressive things to say about either of these guys. And
yeah, I'm just going to kind of assume that Karl Roberson doesn't have very good takedown defense.
yeah,
honestly.
yeah, that's, I guess so.
As a kickboxer transitioning into MMA with 5 fights, almost all of which have ended immediately with strikes, he might be able to stop Stewart and just make this fight his really quickly. But Stewart comes out, even if he doesn't have a lot of technique, he's got a high power wrestling game.
Yeah, he pushes a fast pace from the get-go.
And he pushes a fast pace, and I think that'll get him the win. I think he can overwhelm Roberson early. Maybe not. Maybe Roberson will stuff it. Maybe Roberson has better cardio and can just outlast him.
Let's be honest. It's a guess. It's what it is. There's just not enough to know what Kyle Roberson brings to the table.
Yeah, because with Stewart, we know he's just going to push for the clinch, push for high amplitude takedowns, throw heat inside every chance he gets, and gas out if things don't go his way really quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna bet on that over, because I mean, too, Stewart has also, even though we do know he does gas out, he has also like gone the distance and finished fights in the 3rd round several times.
Yeah. He will continue pushing the pace. It's just a matter of, is the opponent more tired than him at that point or not? That's what determines whether or not it works.
And I'm kind of thinking it with somebody who's not like a Easter Island statue to try and take down, then that might be something he can do a bit better at middleweight. So,
boy, that would be a good nickname, Francimar the Moa Bajoso. Wouldn't that be good?
Would be.
That works.
Oh, odds on that bout. What do we got here? Darren Stewart is a pretty reasonable underdog. Opened at plus 150, adjusted up to plus 166, and has moved steadily but not violently upward to plus 176 now. And Karl Roberson opened at minus 190, adjusted down to minus 211, and is now at minus 220. Given what's out there on Roberson, I think that's a little ridiculous, but
yeah. You get 15 seconds with a knockout, and so you get a bunch of shine going into those odds, I imagine.
And he's done some kickboxing and some boxing, but it's not like he's been a good kickboxer.
No.
He's been somebody who has lost all of his kickboxing bouts.
He's been a professional opponent at the very best.
Yeah, a professional opponent. So I gotta go with Stewart here, just as the much more experienced, and well, not much more, but the more experienced and more baseline sort of typical MMA game that works.
Yeah, he may be worth a bet if those odds continue to expand, just based on the pressure, the takedowns, and the experience.
Yeah,
because there really is
I'm not going to say that.
No reason.
I'm not going to bet on anybody. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things. Looking at those odds, it's a little weird. Next up, light heavyweight bout: Jake Collier, Marcel Fortuna, and Fortuna is he bugs me a little bit in that he's one of those fighters that I felt like I had just the right read on him heading into the UFC. And then he got like one win. I guess I'd call this the Justin Scoggins conundrum. Where I had the read on him as a fighter heading into the promotion. And then he got a win that just was kind of tore down that read. Where it's oh, wow, he actually threw some sharp counter punches, showed some KO power. And then suddenly his next fight is exactly the fighter he looked like he was before.
Yep. We call that a fluke. Yeah. Right? I mean, what else is there to say about that knockout of Marcel Fortuna's? It was just a fluke.
Yeah. And so the thing with Jake Collier is that Jake Collier is the kind of dude who gets caught by flukes. He pushes an absurd pace that even he can't really maintain. He gets hit a ton doing it. and isn't the most durable guy. He's not the least durable, but he's very crackable. And then he's just not technically dominant anywhere. His striking is wild. His wrestling is a bit wild and mostly just kind of based on momentum. And his grappling is very much just let me find an angle to try and create some offense with you on the ground. And at light heavyweight, that just also like it seems especially non-functional to be kind of a unstructured, chinny light heavyweight who has to try and implement a highly athletic game when you're not that great an athlete. So I'm guessing this will play to Fortuna's desire to fight a slow-paced, on the back foot, counter-punching fight, or if Collier tries to tangle up and make this a grappling match, play into Fortuna's grappling, and let him land a shot to hurt Collier, maybe knock him out, or just kind of generally take rounds. Collier could swarm him and land something because Fortuna does fight at a pretty slow pace to keep himself from gassing out. But Collier to date has not, other than that body kick he landed on Alberto Uda, he hasn't really had any ability to take over a fight and land a fight-ending shot. So I got to pick Fortuna here.
Picking Fortuna. I mean, I don't know. Based on that description, it sounds like Jake Collier fits right in at light heavyweight. A guy whose game requires a much higher level of athleticism than he's capable of producing, who, like, I don't know, just slightly doesn't work. Marcel Fortuna, though, I mean, he's got to fit in at light heavyweight too. Like his game is, I don't want to say it's totally devoid of process, but there's a lot of aimlessness in Fortuna's fight.
He's Francimar Bajos 2.0.
Sure, yeah. And I do love Francimar Bajos, but yeah, I don't know. I still have questions. Like you can say that Jake Collier has not looked phenomenal with his like finishing power, but also like we know that's the case with Marcel Fortuna as well. Who else has he flattened with a single shot other than Anthony Hamilton? Nobody. And we have in Jake Collier a fighter who at the very least is extremely aggressive, and despite being tagged will continue to up the aggression. Now, I'm not sure that Jake Collier can actually maintain the pace he likes to set. We've seen him tire out pretty dramatically in a few of his fights. But I do wonder if that will get to Fortuna, because I just have this feeling that, like you said, Fortuna's slow pace is all about not expending too much energy. And if he's thrown around, if he's forced to swing, even if he is forced to grapple, Fortuna has never even been that amazingly aggressive as a grappler that he manages to catch people who are smart enough to avoid, playing in dangerous positions with him.
He's more of he's overly aggressive as a grappler, actually. Like, he will just try to like jump on the back and jump on a rear naked choke without
he's not systematic at all, though. He totally loses position every time. He goes for very low percentage stuff as soon as his back hits the ground, rather than like making the guy grapple with him and pulling him into a dominant position. I'm going to go with Jake Collier. I think Collier's pace is going to get to Fortuna. I think Collier is still adding tools to his game, and I still kind of don't really know what Fortuna does.
Well, Fortuna is at AKA these days, so
yeah, that changes something.
Yeah, I don't
at least in the gameness department that changes something. Just having some experience with a guy who gets in your face and swings at you. Yeah,
I just don't think Collier is a good enough athlete, even for middleweight, and at light heavyweight. That's 95% of what counts. So can't take him here, but
I'm gonna stick with Collier. I'm gonna stick with Collier for the striking skill and everything, but I just don't. It's a very good point. And if Fortuna comes in here and looks just a lot more down to exchange and scare Collier off early or catch him with something big, then that AKA training will have paid off.
Indeed. Fortuna is a sizable favorite, opened at -215, adjusted down to -228, and drifting since then down to -239. Collier opened at +165, adjusted up to +189, and then dropped, moving up and down a bit to +192. Once again, I'm a little. I mean, I'm not that surprised the odds are that wide here, just because Collier has generally, even in fights like his Uda fight where he's won, he still got hit a lot with a lot of hard shots. So I'm not surprised he's a dramatic underdog, but Fortuna definitely is more like that Anthony Hamilton fight really did sell people on something that he may not be able to deliver over and over again.
Yeah, it's especially not unimpressive, like it doesn't matter, but it doesn't have the same impact when you consider that Anthony Hamilton has just been getting finished by everyone lately. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't really say that much about Marcel Fortuna's game, I don't think.
That brings us to a welterweight bout. Court McGee, Shawn Strickland, your boy, go after it.
Two of my boys. Big fan of Court McGee as well, you know. It's good to see him fighting actively again in the UFC after a substantial layoff. And I don't know. I mean, I think the dynamic in this one is fairly clear. I think it's Court McGee is going to try to press forward and put his shots together. He's going to try to kick the legs and the body. He is going to try and just chain strikes together into takedown attempts, try to tie Shawn Strickland up in the clinch, and hopefully drag him to the ground. And Strickland is going to try to move and maintain distance and try to clip Court McGee on the way in. Both guys can win this fight with those game plans, right? We have seen both guys susceptible to those approaches in a few of their fights. Court McGee was lit up when he tried his crazy swarming combination attack style against Robert Whittaker, for example. Even in brief periods of the Ben Saunders fight, he was getting caught doing the same thing. And meanwhile, Shawn Strickland has, by arguably more effective pressure fighters, been shut down entirely. Most notably that recent fight with Kamaru Usman, in which he just got absolutely nothing done until like the last 10 seconds when he realized he should maybe go for a knockout. Shawn Strickland, the problem with Shawn Strickland is not one of, I think, skill or ability. I think he has great eyes. I think he has good, sharp technique. I think he moves well, and I think he's got a good frame. The problem is mental. He just cannot make himself fight consistently at his opponent's pace. I think he has that young veteran mentality that we talk about a lot, where he feels that he's in the fight if he's not being badly beaten. And until he is being really badly beaten, it can be hard for him to flip the switch and go into aggressor mode. Although sometimes when he's totally in control, he is an aggressor and does swarm people and beat them up. So it is very difficult to get a read on Shawn Strickland. Maybe that's why I'm so fascinated by him, because like my job is to understand fighters. And while I like a lot of what I see from Shawn Strickland, I still don't really understand him. I think the problem for Court McGee implementing that pressure game is, I'm not sure that Court can push the same pace that he used to push in the past. I have seen him slow down visibly in his last few fights since coming back. I think he's starting to feel his age a little bit at this point. The other problem is, can he out-wrestle Shawn Strickland? Because even if he can put the pressure on Strickland, I'm not confident he can just outstrike him. At the most, all he's going to do then is force Strickland to reset back to his range, which, he can hit McGee a lot farther away than McGee can hit him. The question so then is really, does McGee control Strickland in the clinch? And I don't know. I have not seen a lot of really impressive wrestling from Court McGee lately. Like he's been a lot of long tie-ups with people, and I think Strickland's pretty good at defending those.
Well, and other than his Santiago Ponzinibbio fight, McGee has only faced really bad wrestlers since 2015.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he got no takedowns on Ponzinibbio.
Yeah. Because otherwise, Dom Steele, Marcel Alexandre Jr., and Ben Saunders are all pretty bad defensive wrestlers.
Yeah, I think that combined with the reach advantage for Strickland is having me pick Strickland here. But if McGee just gets to have his pace, then Strickland could absolutely give away 2 rounds. Like, this is exactly the kind of fight in which he could give away those 2 rounds. For me, I'm interested to see if Strickland has made any changes or improvements to deal with this style, because this is going to be a style that will continually trouble him if he doesn't address it now. So this is a development fight for Strickland for me.
Yeah, it's kind of the lowest. I mean, I don't want to say it's like to knock Court McGee, but it's kind of like and not really the lowest, but it's like the lower pace, the lower bar version of what he's had trouble with. And it's like,
no, I agree.
You lost this fight to Santiago Ponzinibbio and you lost this fight to Kamaru Usman. Here's somebody who's a lot less good at the same kind of fight. Mm-hmm. Can you win this fight at all?
Someone who is similarly determined, but much less athletic and less skilled.
And I am going to trust that Strickland can, mostly just because of the physicality at play. I just don't think that. First of all, McGee doesn't have the range tools to really make Strickland pay for carrying his head so high and himself so upright. He can throw a right hand, but it's a really predictable right hand. Like, he's going to pump a jab, throw the right hand behind it. Yeah. And that's
super mechanical.
Yeah, super mechanical. So I expect Strickland to be able to deal with that. And then McGee, a lot of his most functional offense comes in clinch tie-ups and dirty boxing. And I'm just not trusting that he can leverage that against somebody so much bigger than him. And so he's probably going to be stuck. What we've seen from McGee in long stretches is, against fighters like Marcel Alexandre or Ben Saunders, or even Dom Steele at times, is him just get stuck out at range, watching and waiting, and into these very sort of where he's just not doing anything, and just maybe his opponent isn't doing anything because they're afraid to get taken down as well. But that benefits Strickland a lot more here. So I got to pick Strickland based on that. But if McGee can just press the clinch and just throw offense and stay after him and eat shots and not get deterred in any way, then he could outwork Strickland.
I will be disappointed if Strickland can't win this one, though, especially because the other thing that the other notable hallmark of McGee's striking is that he squares up constantly.
Yep.
So if Strickland with his long ass jab cannot control the distance against Court McGee enough to win 2 of 3 rounds, then it'll be a letdown.
He squares up constantly, and he will go out of his way to make sure that he only throws power with his right hand. Like,
I just want to make sure you're not threatened by anything coming from this side. Just to reassure you.
Yeah, he could have an opportunity to land a left hook, and he will just put it on the person's shoulder and throw the right hand uppercuts instead for forever.
Which is especially effective for a Court McGee, a fighter known for his punching power. You can really afford to just load up on one hand.
So
I don't want to be rude. I like Court McGee. Court McGee's a cool guy. He's also part of our superhero team of people who have died of heroin overdoses. He and Matt Brown both on the same card now.
Yeah.
You believe that?
They'll have to stick Jared Gordon on there, and they can form like a Justice League. All right. I'm going to skip that before I get too far into making some terrible jokes. So I know what I'm capable of, and I'm moving right along. Court McGee is the underdog here pretty reasonably. Opened at plus 160, has pretty much drifted outward ever since to plus 209 now. Shawn Strickland opened at minus 210 and has steadily drifted down to minus 260. I do think that kind of ignores that this is the kind of fight that Shawn Strickland likes to lose, but only kind of. I think this, it plays to his physical advantages. Mm-hmm. So I'm picking Strickland, but it is the kind of fight he likes to lose.
Yeah.
That brings us to a women's strawweight bout. First bout on the FS1 prelims, Angela Hill versus Nina Ansaroff. And this is actually kind of a tricky fight for me because I think Hill, to her own necessity, has ended up as a fighter stuck between worlds, kind of.
How do you mean?
Where, I mean, she came out as this, like, heater-throwing power Muay Thai striker who had no wrestling and just got taken down and outworked by or submitted by anyone who didn't want to deal with her striking game. And to adjust for that, she has become a high-paced, sort of high footwork striker who has thus lost some steam on her striking and has also not been able to maintain that footwork because of the amount of energy it takes and that style for the amount of energy it takes. So she ends up as this weird sort of fighter stuck between styles where she'll be like out moving a lot and trying to like pump high energy or high volume strikes out for a while. And then other times she'll just kind of like settle down, sit right in front of somebody and look just for a big power shot. And it leaves her a little, like, it leaves her in an uncomfortable place where she does not dominate Ashley Yoder nearly as well as she should, or Kayleen Medeiros nearly as well as she should. You know, like, she wins these fights still, but they are not the kind of one-sided beating that you expected after she, you know, KO'd Alita Gray and Stephanie Eggink. And I don't... The weird thing with Ansaroff in this fight then is that Ansaroff throws good power, and she knows what kind of fighter she wants to be. She's got fast hands. She can bite down. She's got some craft, especially the way she uses low kicks to off-balance people is really nice while getting, you know, she gets people thinking about her the power she's throwing in her hooks, and then she'll hit like a nice little low kick while somebody's off balance that cuts their legs out and cuts their balance out really nicely. She's also almost entirely just setting her feet and there to be hit. Like, her defense is nada. She's improved a lot from being the fighter she used to be, where she would just, if you pressured her at all, she would just back straight up and throw spinning strikes that didn't land and would get her horribly out of position to be either taken down or hit again. That has improved a lot, but her response to pressure is still back straight up and throw heaters and hope you go away. And that should be enough to give Hill the win here, because Hill's just much craftier about how she commands range and how she picks her shots and how she pot shots and things like that. But if Hill gets sucked into just an exchange of heavy leather too much, Ansaroff has some craft that could get her off balance, and especially is willing to jump to a takedown game where she can land some really good ground and pound. So if Hill gets sucked into a just trading power shots fight, then Ansaroff can really be in this and could make it a tough fight on her. If Hill can stay more active, stay in and out of range, find angles, pick shots, I think she'll take the decision. But Ansaroff is very live here.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing with Ansaroff too, like you look for sometimes you look for statistical anomalies or whatever, or for patterns to try and give you an idea of how a fighter fights. Well, there isn't really one with the 3 fights that Ansaroff has had, and I think that basically just says that she fights at the pace her opponent gives her. because she does so love, as you said, to plant her feet, kind of pull back a little bit, maybe walk you into a jab, and then she's coming in with 2 or 3 big winging shots. She is comfortable exchanging whenever you give her an opportunity to exchange.
Yeah.
And that makes for an interesting matchup for Angela Hill, who doesn't really strike with that much authority when she's moving, but really, really needs to move in order to avoid being outstruck by Ansarov in those exchanges, right? So she's not going to be hitting Ansarov with a ton of authority if she fights the way she needs to fight. And if she craves a little punching authority, then she's going to probably get sucked into a fight that Ansarov is better at, is more suited for. One thing that I think may happen here, we have seen glimmers of this in other Hill performances recently, is I think when Ansarov plants her feet, we're going to also see Hill go for some takedowns. Hill has a pretty solid top game on the ground. She's got pretty solid jiu-jitsu in general, actually. She has not really, since going to Invicta, she has not been embarrassed by even the best grapplers she's faced. She's been pretty solid on the floor. I think she may go for a takedown and try to take some of the steam out of Ansarov on the ground with some ground and pound, sit in half guard, maybe hold her down. If she's capable of doing that, my hopes for her winning go much higher. Otherwise, I agree with you. I think Hill's a slight favorite here, but it's a tough fight to call, and Ansarov is definitely in it.
Yeah, because it really, like I say, I just don't. The problem with Hill is you watch her and she just looks like a fighter uncomfortably trying to turn herself into something else, and she has to, but it's never quite the comfortable fight it should be.
Yeah, some of that too, I think, is just an experience. Like, it is easy to forget that Hill has only been doing this for like 3.5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pro, and she has made drastic strides already. So I think probably sometime, maybe even within the next year, we are going to see her settle down a bit and sort of find her stride. But until then, fights like this are going to be tricky to call.
Hill is a reasonable favorite here, opening at -215, adjusting to -199, and has stayed pretty much stable at -197 since then. And Ansarov opening at +165 and currently at +163. So pretty much no movement on those lines since opening. I don't know. I think as an underdog, like Hill is never going to be a comfortable favorite right now. That's just all you can say about her, because she was much more, she's much more athletic than Ashley Yoder, much more well-rounded than Kayleen Medeiros, and those weren't amazingly comfortable fights for her. And so even though they're unanimous decisions, I'm always, anytime I see Angela Hill against somebody like Nina Ansarov, it never should feel like, oh yeah, I know Hill's just going to walk away with this, And let's see, that brings us to a lightweight bout. Sage Northcutt, Michel Quinones, and lightweight, yeah. And is this
me, right?
Yeah, this is you.
I mean, what the hell do you do with Sage Northcutt? Like, you remember like a year ago when every single fighter and every single fan was complaining about the insane push that was being given to fighters like Northcutt and Paige Van Zandt? I'm so extremely over the both of them. It doesn't even seem like they were ever like momentarily popular. And it's really just because like I need to see some proof out of either one of them that they are, like fighters worth paying attention to, like contenders or contenders in the making. And I just don't see that from Sage Northcutt yet. Obviously, the athleticism is there. Obviously, we have glimmers of things like great timing, but the man, like he couldn't compete with Mickey Gall, who is like a very one-dimensional fighter. Like if you have to ask for a fighter whom you can just use the specialized striking part of your game against to beat him, it's Mickey Gall. Yeah. And Mickey Gall knocked Sage Northcutt down, right? Like as soon as Northcutt seemed like he might be getting comfortable, Gall caught him with a right hand on the ear and put him on his ass and finished him. And of all the places that Sage Northcutt could have gone to, his jumping from camp to camp trying to find himself, he went to Team Alpha Male. Like, that's the team that's gonna, I don't know. We may see some phenomenal scrambling and whatnot out of Sage Northcutt. Team Alpha Male has always done great with their wrestling room environment. They always have phenomenal grapplers and scramblers. Maybe that's exactly what Sage Northcutt needs. But I don't know. There's something just weird going on with Sage Northcutt where it just doesn't seem like, I'm not even sure how much he likes fighting. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, when in his fights, when he gets clipped, he kind of seems to shut off and just all the energy goes out of him, which kind of suggests maybe he doesn't even like doing this. And he's just like a karate kid whose dad made him do it. I don't know. For these reasons, I'm going to pick Michel Quinones here. Even though Quinones got absolutely blasted by Jared Gordon, just flung around and chewed into mincemeat, he is still a powerful counter striker who I think can probably clip Sage Northcutt after the first round. I think he can force Northcutt to chase after him, and I think Northcutt will, because he still does not have any idea, I don't think, of how to beat somebody other than overwhelming them early and trying to get him out of there, and then narrowly surviving like dozens of scrapes with death after that if he hopes to get a decision, right? Like, I'm not trying to be hard on Sage Northcutt. I'm just trying to say how difficult it is to like have a lot of faith in his abilities. What saved him in the Enrique Marion fight, for example?
Yeah.
When he like almost got armbarred, when the third round was slipping away from him, it was just that he's a superior athlete. That's all that saved him. That Enrique Marion is really not athletic at all. Same thing saved him in the Cody Pfister fight. He ended up in a bad situation there. Cody Pfister, not an athlete. So Sage Northcutt survived. Michel Quinones is an okay athlete. And at the very least, he has a lot of power. So I'm going to pick him.
Yeah, this is... You're making me feel... like you're making a very good point for me not wanting to be a believer. Because a part of me feels like if Sage Northcutt is going to win another fight in the UFC, it's going to be a fight like Quinones.
Yeah.
Because Quinones is basically just a worse version of Sage Northcutt, kind of. Like, I mean, he's more experienced, and so he doesn't make the same sort of freak-out mistakes.
Yeah.
But he just wants to hang out at range and rely on his athleticism to get him through fights.
Yes.
Like, he also has terrible defensive reactions to things and is, by the similar standard, was getting tagged up by Jared Gordon, which, Jared Gordon absolutely can tag somebody up. But we also saw in that fight that Gordon had with Hakran Diaz, it wasn't Jared Gordon's pure stand-up striking skill that won him that fight. Hakran Diaz was picking him off almost all fight, accepting that he could not keep Gordon's pace.
Yeah. Although I do feel confident that Jared Gordon would probably also run through Sage Northcutt.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, there's no question.
The same style, like the same. That's the point about Quinones. Like, the same things that would work against him will work against Northcutt. Northcutt is not special. That's the real thing. Like, I don't think beyond having athletic talent, he's not really a special fighter.
No. Well, he's an absurdly, he is absurdly athletic. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, a part of me wants to pick Sage because you have two guys who are going to fight a similar kind of fight, and one of them is just a better athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And makes me want to pick Northcutt. Because part of, too, like, what got him caught really by Gall, he did get hit a few times, but Gall has got this sort of funky power timing thing to him. He even caught Randy Brown a few times. Is that Gall was on a single leg and had one arm wrapped around Northcutt's leg, and the moment as he dropped the leg, he came over the top with the right hand.
Mm-hmm.
that dropped him, and it was a wrestling threat that Quinones is almost certainly not going to press Northcutt with, even if he should.
He probably should, right? If you're going to fight Sage Northcutt, like who wouldn't wrestle him?
Exactly. Just
may as well try.
For the hell of it, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna throw a pick out there for Sage Northcutt, even though I think you're absolutely right to pick Quinones, and there's no good reason to trust Sage Northcutt's panic or decision making, and frankly, Team Alpha Male, they don't inspire a lot of confidence with what they do with exciting athletes that don't have a deep wrestling background. What's been going on with Teruto Ishihara isn't exactly like a great poster for Team Alpha Male success. Or Andrei Fili has taken years and years to become a comfortable, a comfortable fighter that is as well-rounded in his areas as he should be.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All this is pretty stupid for me to pick Sage Northcutt on. So
no, I get it. Like he is much more athletic. Who knows if he can turn that corner? At this point, I'm just kind of like, I gotta see it before I expect it from him. Because I just don't think he's.
You know what? You're right. I'll pick Quinones. I shouldn't.
No, don't do that. Now we're gonna be wrong. You have to disagree.
I shouldn't be dumb just to be dumb, because I see the athleticism and I see a fight in front of him that is, as good a style matchup against a good athlete as he's gonna get.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel like, he could win this. But the truth is that if he gets tagged up a couple times, then the chances are much higher that it turns in Quinones' favor.
Yeah, a lot of it too is just probably inexperience, but that's the thing, is that Sage Northcutt, I think that's probably why he folds so quickly, in combination with whatever's going on with him mentally. He just never sees it coming when he gets caught.
Yeah.
He gets into this rhythm where he's like, oh, it's like my first few fights when I dominated my opponents easily. Except now he's fighting better guys, and so then they smash him with a shot as soon as he's thinking, now I've got it in the bag. And he just has not yet learned through experience to avoid falling into this sort of easy confidence where he's able to be caught out.
Yeah, that's the truth. And you're right. Quinones is the smart pick here.
I don't know. Now he's going to lose. Now he's going to get knocked out.
I know. Now Sage Northcutt is going to hit some jumping wheel kick that
yes,
breaks his jaw in 5 places, and everybody will be like, oh my God.
Hopefully something that gives us no new information about how good Sage Northcutt really is.
Yeah, it almost certainly will be. All right. Northcutt, of course, is the favorite because people are, like I almost was, and you saved me from being, people are marks.
Don't say save, because now you're just making
I'm pinning this all on you. It is all, you saved me, Connor. You saved me from making a dumb pick.
I'll lean into it. I'm a fucking MMA genius. Sage Northcutt is a joke. Anyone who disagrees needs to be saved.
All right. Northcutt opened at -245, adjusted up to -178, and is now at -175. So that line hasn't moved much from there. Quinones opened at +175, adjusted down to +149, and is now at +146. So honestly, those lines should be trending towards even, but people are marks, and Northcutt has name value, and he's a hyper athletic, exciting guy that's very likable.
It is wild the way name value alone gets people to bet on a fight, right?
Yeah.
People who make money from betting know that you make money on the undercard where the lines are all wrong. You don't make money on the fight you're excited about, because everyone's excited about that, and so the lines are just insane. Because as soon as most people recognize someone's name, they just start betting on them. I don't know. All
right, that brings us to a women's strawweight bout: Tatiana Suarez, Viviane Pereira, Pereira. I don't know, whatever.
I think it's just Pereira,
whatever. Brazil, all your H's and R's are a continued bane on my existence.
The V's are also pronounced as H's. Viviane, Pereira.
Okay, whatever.
We're getting into making Zane uncomfortable with cultural stereotyping territory.
All right. No, I'm not going to stereotype anything. That's not a stereotype. It's just my own desire to have everything fit only the way that, like, the only other language I'm comfortable pronouncing is Spanish. And so every other language I want to pronounce on Spanish letter conventions.
Yeah.
All right. This is a two true outcome fight, basically, as you like to call it. Either Pereira stuffs all the takedowns and lights Suarez up standing, or Suarez takes Pereira down and works her on the ground for either a submission or for 3 rounds or the better part of 2 rounds for the win. I'm going to bet Suarez here because technical wrestlers like her are few and far between in women's MMA, so they're hard to prepare for women. And honestly, Pereira's takedown defense and ground game off of her back looked pretty bad against Valerie Letourneau. Letourneau just didn't ever go back to it after having a lot of success there in round 1. Like, Letourneau took her down past guard into mount immediately, and then was inside control for long stretches, and then just never got the fight there again. And so I think that's Suarez is going to be way too driven to get that fight to that point over and over again for me to pick Pereira here.
What's been going on with Suarez? Why has she been out so long?
I don't know. She had some kind of injury, but I can't remember what it was. I'll check while you're talking.
I'm basically on the same page. I think Pereira is exactly the kind of fighter who would beat Suarez, with different circumstances. Like, as you said, it is particularly difficult, I think, to expect fighters in this division to be prepared for a wrestler of Suarez's caliber. Her shots, her chain wrestling, her pins, her reversals are all legitimately pretty solid. Pereira does have the she's got a squat build, which is automatically good for defending takedowns. She moves pretty well, and she can maintain a pace, and she's a good athlete. She's just barely muted that before the thunder came. She is like, I don't know, like if this were a different division, this fight might be Henry Briones versus damn, I always forget his name. Who is our beloved little crazy Brazilian athlete with the knockout punches? He's spinning back fisted Henry Briones.
Davison Alcantara?
No.
No, not Davison Figueiredo, but Douglas D'Souza.
Yes. It'd be like that, right? Where like Douglas D'Souza is used to seeing shot takedowns and defending them, and he can move around and pick off a wrestler on the way in. This is that kind of style matchup. But like you, I'm not sold on the notion that Pereira is used to stopping those takedowns. I think that Suarez does kind of have a secret weapon for her in that sense. But if Suarez cannot get her first few takedowns, then Pereira can almost certainly win a decision over her.
Oh yeah.
If she can use her feet and just avoid the shots, like shut the shots down before Suarez gets in on her hips, she's going to have a much better chance of racking up points and winning this fight.
Yeah, Pereira is a much better striker, like leaps and bounds better, moment to moment. So if this stays there, it's all her.
I'm going with Suarez for the same reasons as you, but
yep.
Caveats.
Suarez is a large favorite, opening at -265, adjusting up to about -240. And then dropping way back down to -275, and now out to -290.
Douglas Andrade, that's his name, right?
Yeah,
Douglas De
Silva is his nickname.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And then let's see. Viviane Pereira opened at plus 185 and then jumped up to plus 224 and is now at plus 231. I think that
seems kind of wide.
It's getting wide for a fight that really is just, if Suarez can't get takedowns, she's screwed. Or,
Right. It seems strange to if we agree that it's like a two true outcome kind of fight, then why should the lines be wide at all? Because basically, if one person doesn't get to do the one thing they do well, then the other person does get to do the one thing they do well.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Suarez has not to date beaten anyone that's as good an athlete as Viviane Pereira. I mean, Amanda Cooper certainly isn't. Neither is Kate Jackson nor JJ Aldrich. Like, Aldrich is probably the best athlete she's beaten. And, so it could be that Pereira is very able to scramble and get up, and that even if Suarez can get takedowns, she can't keep enough control to make them meaningful.
Or she can and maybe gets tired after a round because she's been out for a year and a half.
Yeah, could be. All right. Brings us to a bantamweight bout. John Dodson, Marlon Moraes. And this is you, I think?
This is me.
Yep.
Excited for this one. I think it's a very intriguing fight and not an easy one to call. The one thing that kind of sells this one for me, that allows me to settle on one side, is the fact that Marlon Moraes, he kind of shit the bed a little bit in his fight with Raphael Assuncao. Not that I don't think that Raphael Assuncao is a phenomenal fighter, as we've already noted, I do, but there was a clear path to victory for Marlon Moraes in that fight, and he did not follow it. Right? Like, you cannot go in there and slow down your pace to a crawl and expect to pick Raphael Assuncao off in exchanges or out pot shot him, right? Because that is his pace. That is his game. Yes, the fight may be close. Yes, you may have an argument for winning, but it is not the best way to beat Raphael Assuncao. It is in fact the best way to lose to Raphael Assuncao before you realize what's happening.
Yeah.
Which happens to a lot of fighters.
It does.
John Dodson can do the same thing, but a lot faster. And that's why I kind of like John Dodson in this fight. He moves a lot better than Raphael Assuncao while preferring and working well with a similar pace. And so it's going to be even harder, I think, for Moraes to track him down with his kicks or to be able to plant his feet in front of him to hit him with something hard. And that did seem to be a big problem for him against Assuncao. Like, he just kept wanting to plant his feet and nail Assuncao. And you just kind of have to just throw a bunch of shots and not be too committed to the idea of one landing clean. You just have to put things out there. His difficulty in doing that against Assuncao does not give me a lot of hope for him against Dodson. Although Moraes is a well-trained and smart fighter, Assuncao may have been a lesson fight for him where he says, all right, I need to change up the way I think about opponents now that I'm in the UFC. But going only on what we've already seen, I'm going to take John Dodson to do basically what he did in the Eddie Wineland fight and just pick up points in a very safe but very intelligent strategy.
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bad for Moraes because it feels like he's going to end up starting his UFC career with two very lackluster losses to very, very good fighters that do not have a lot of fan love to them.
Right. They're going to kill all of Marlon Moraes' momentum.
Yeah. And it just makes me wish, like, I would much rather have seen John Dodson versus Raphael Assuncao and Marlon Moraes versus Matthew Lopez. You know? Like, if I were going to get fights that I think would be much more I think fights that would be better for all the fighters involved, I think that those would be better fights, frankly.
Yeah. Although as a, Moraes is 29. He debuted in 2007. Like, it is probably the time at which you got to say
Oh, well,
either
I
you're
know.
a top contender or you're not.
I know. I'm not saying that it's bad. Like, Moraes is getting thrown into fights that he shouldn't be in over his head.
Yeah.
I'm saying he's a fun action fighter.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to see him introduced to fans as a fun action fighter rather than a guy who loses to the top 5 of the bantamweight division.
Yeah. You give him these 2 slow-paced spoilers in a row. That does seem like a particularly unglamorous way for his momentum to evaporate.
Yeah, I got to agree with you otherwise, because really the only way that Dodson's been beat lately is by, guys that can match him for speed relatively and who put out a ton of pace and a ton of volume and a ton of offense and don't really care what's coming back at them in Lineker's case. And Moraes doesn't seem like he has the style to do that. He seems like it seems like he's built his entire career facing people who are much worse strikers than him and has thus built the striking game around, I can sit down and I can be in the pocket against somebody who's not as good as me, and I'm going to have the opportunities to sit down on power strikes and walk people into power strikes so that I can get that offense off. And
it's as if he developed his style training with Frankie Edgar.
Yeah.
He's just an anti-Frankie Edgar, but that not really like even like Jose Aldo ended up in that situation. Like, some guys can look like phenomenal strikers, and then you realize they're not that comfortable in striking exchanges. They're just comfortable being the striker in a matchup.
And I don't want to speak bad about Mark Henry trained strikers, but we've seen a ton of them. And they're not always the cleanest defensive fighters in the world.
Yeah, I think they're getting better. I think Mark too is like starting to teach better defensive mechanics, but yeah, that's a fair criticism.
Yeah. Like his fighters, especially as they learn the tools and all that, like they seem to be learning, I got to put out a lot of offense and I'm going to be there to be hit. Mm-hmm. And and like the defensive mechanics of even like tucking your chin properly or making sure that you don't get clubbed don't seem to be there. And if they get there, they take a long time to develop. Because even for Moraes, like, he was getting plonked by Raphael Assuncao a few times in that fight, where he was just sitting there looking to bite down, and Assuncao would.
I can't critique him too hard for that. I mean, Assuncao's legit, man. Like, he catches a lot of very good fighters off guard. He's still, even in losing much more convincingly the second time to TJ Dillashaw, got his licks in. He's still landed some really big counters just because Dillashaw, like Moraes, was there to be hit.
I think, Moraes is there to be hit. Like, he's not going to be a defensive wizard, is the thing. No. Even as a decent, even if as an okay defensive fighter, he doesn't prioritize defense in any way.
Right. And in particular, not even like separate from the other Mark Henry fighters, I would say that boxing defense is not a particular strong suit of Moraes's.
Yeah. So it seems made for Dodson to stay safe and plonk his way to victory. The big hope would be that Moraes can up his output and can trap Dodson into head kicks. That would be the thing to really watch for, is if Moraes can set up not his boxing as much, but find a way to get Dodson looking at his hands so that the high kicks can start coming in.
Yeah, if Dodson takes the slow pace too far and falls into like a pure counterpunching game, Moraes could just do what Dillashaw did to Garbrandt. He could just fire off kick after kick until one eventually finds the mark.
Yeah. Odds on that are basically dead even. Dodson opened at -120, adjusted up and down to about -115, and is now at -116. Moraes opened at -120, adjusted up and down to -107, and is now at -107. So I think that Dodson has the edge here, but it'll be
I think it's
interesting.
still a fairly well-matched, close fight. I mean, so was the Assuncao fight. Again,
Yeah.
we're talking about it like, oh, Moraes gave it away, which he did in a way, but he gave it away in the weird way you give fights away to fighters like Assuncao. Like, he was competitive.
Yeah.
He was in the fight. He just fought Assuncao's fight.
But God, that sounds just like a Dodson fight. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although, like
Dodson,
again,
arguably Dodson beat John Lineker too. Like, you know.
oh yeah, he's got a good case for that. And Dodson, I think has turned the corner from being like the frustrating, drinks his own Kool-Aid type of fighter he was before, where he's like, oh, this cool slow paced fight, and then like 2.5 rounds go by, and you're like, oh, he hasn't done anything. He hasn't gotten anything done. Now I think he is a lot more focused. I think the Eddie Wineland fight was a big example of that. Just how, despite going back to a slow pace, unlike the Lineker bout, he did control Wineland and avoided his ranges and used the right weapons. I think he's learning from his experience in a way that is not good for Marlon Moraes.
Yeah. That brings us to a lightweight bout: Joe Lauzon, Clay Guida, and this is kind of like this is like the Suarez Pereira fight without like the same checks on the without quite the same balance on the Pereira side, which is basically Lauzon gets a submission in round 1 over Clay Guida, or Joe Lauzon gets worked for a unanimous decision wrestling win. And I'm going to pick the latter. I'm going to take Clay Guida here. I know he's subbable. I know he absolutely can get submitted in the first round. I know his chin isn't what it used to be, but it's not trash yet. Guida's chin is no longer unbreakable, but it's not as though he can't still take shots and keep fighting. You know, he got through two rounds before getting knocked out by Brian Ortega. He got through 2 rounds before being knocked out by Chad Mendez. He's not just glassy in there. And Lauzon still is a dude who starts out like a house on fire and then just quickly burns to the ground, rather. I shouldn't say slowly. Like that Stevie Ray fight came out looking like a beast and then was just getting absolutely hammered for the rest of that fight.
It's the more of a beast Joe Lauzon is early, the more quickly he burns down.
Yeah. So I gotta pick Guida here, but Lauzon absolutely could submit him early because Guida has his submission game has never quite, like, he's a good wrestler when he's all on top ride and all that, but his submission defense has never quite clicked.
Yeah, I'm siding with you. Can't really add too much to it. I think it's a very simple fight to understand, but a very difficult one to predict because both guys have a very clear path to victory.
Yeah.
I'm taking Guida by takedowns after surviving probably a few scares in the first.
That's about it. Clay Guida is the favorite mildly here. Opened at -120, adjusted up and down to -123, now at -120. Joe Lauzon opening at -120, adjusting up and down to -107, now at -104.
Joe Lauzon's last 3 fights have all gone to decision, which is a rarity for him. I think a sure sign that he's probably slowing down, that he's now going to decisions rather than getting those early finishes. But every single one of them was either a split or a majority. Like, Joe Lauzon cannot go to the end of the 3rd round with a clear idea of having won the fight.
Yeah, and the held fight, he thought he lost. Like, I didn't think he necessarily lost that fight, but Joe Lauzon said he lost that fight.
Yeah.
So that would make it 3 straight decision losses had that gone against him.
And a large part of all those, except for the Ray fight, but the Miller and held fights, Lauzon being out-wrestled a bit, suggests that Guida has a chance.
And well, the way Guida looked against Cope, frankly, like he came out, he looked dedicated. Like he threw right hands, he was aggressive, he wasn't afraid to implement his game, and he went straight to his wrestling. His wrestling looked good, and he was able to just keep after it round after round. Like,
and also I should say this is relevant to the Lauzon fight, but for Guida fans, Guida was doing really well against Brian Ortega.
oh yeah,
he was really in that fight, and Ortega kind of had to scrape out the finish. Ortega is by far the most similar fighter to Lauzon he's faced in a while, and much less. Ortega's a lot better at getting third round finishes, shall we say, than Joe Lauzon is.
Yeah. All right, bantamweight bout next. Raphael Assuncao, Matthew Lopez. It's you.
I like this fight too. Everybody knows I like Raphael Assuncao. I have probably mentioned him way more times during this show than I need to. But now I get to mention him a lot. Yeah, this is really another fight with a pretty clear dynamic. I think Matt Lopez needs to get Raphael Assuncao to the ground, and Raphael Assuncao needs to tag Matt Lopez on the way in. Assuncao is, like Johnny Eduardo before him, not particularly keen on fighting a fast enough pace to respond to a guy like Lopez, but he is also substantially better at defending takedowns. He is substantially better on the ground. Assuncao's jiu-jitsu is not to be overlooked.
He's also substantially better defensively in general.
Yes. Yeah, the big thing is that he's a much better defender and counterpuncher. Eduardo likes to just run you around and then run you into a shot. Assuncao can do that, but he can also evade damage in the pocket and respond with hard counters. That makes it pretty easy for me to pick Assuncao, even though I know Lopez is dangerous, because even Johnny Eduardo was sort of, like, for a brief minute and a half, was having his way with Matt Lopez on the feet and just couldn't keep it up. Assuncao, I think, can keep it up unless he doesn't finish Lopez in the first and starts to tire from Lopez's pace. But I'm also pretty certain that Lopez will start to tire from that pace, especially if he's getting lit up as he comes forward. So I like Assuncao by decision or a late finish.
Yeah, Lopez is kind of like if Mickey Gall actually had seasoning and was actually like the fighter advertised. And
Lopez is legit. I think he's probably still going places even if he loses here. He's going to stick around.
Yeah, but his game is still like, it's that kind of unstructured, the striking is tricky because it's fast and it's powerful and he bites down on it more than you think he would. But it's still wild, and him just kind of throwing arms out there. It's still the kind of thing where he can get absolutely lit up by Mitch Gagnon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just too good for Assuncao. Like, Assuncao may, he may not like the pace that Lopez fights at, but I don't see any signs that he can't handle that pace. Like, Pedro Munhoz pushes a hell of a pace and is a better striker, and he got nothing done against Raphael Assuncao at all. It's just, it feels like just the right fight to shut Lopez down at the moment and push him back a little, which is kind of why I wish that it was Marlon Moraes versus Matthew Lopez, because I think Moraes would be a little more, because Moraes is so willing to stand his ground and throw power, it would be a more interesting chance for Lopez to work some magic, or it would be a good chance for Moraes to show to everybody that he can be this huge KO threat. Whereas this is just, we're going to watch we're going to see the reason once again that Assuncao has only lost to TJ Dillashaw recently, and otherwise has wins over TJ Dillashaw and Aljamain Sterling and Marlon Moraes and
Brian Caraway and Pedro
Munhoz and most of the top of that division right now.
Yeah.
Odds on that fight: Lopez is a sizable underdog, opened at plus 200, adjusted up to plus 242, now at plus 262. Assuncao opening at minus 280 and dropping down steadily to minus 335, which feels about right for me here. Lopez is working on the classic choker's chance where he's got the back take game, he's got some clubbing power. Maybe he catches Assuncao with something, maybe, but it doesn't feel likely.
No, it doesn't. Assuncao, by the way, also a split decision machine, 6 split or majority decisions on his record, but for very different reasons than Joe Lauzon. I think that sort of gets out the essence of what you wanted to say about why this should be matched differently. Like Assuncao is, you give him a certain level of opponent, he just does Raphael Assuncao things. Just very casually wins the fight.
Yeah, well, mostly because he's such a safe defensive fighter that it's really hard to just be like aggressive and overwhelm him.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
It takes more than that. You actually have to have things to pick off his defense. The big thing for Lopez here could be his size and rate and reach. In that, like we saw in the Assuncao's fight with Sterling, when Sterling actually realized he should probably throw some strikes late in the fight, he got a lot done. And Lopez does have, like, Lopez has more range to him and more size to him than Moraes or Munhoz or even Dillashaw.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that could be interesting in and of itself if Lopez can just be busy enough and rangy enough. Then I feel like Lopez has more of that. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe I'm misreading that because I'm seeing 69-inch reach, 5'7". What's Assuncao? He only got 66-inch reach, and
5'5". He is a bigger man. I mean,
yeah, he's bigger. Sterling definitely has that build. Sterling has a 71-inch reach. Sterling's reach is a little ridiculous. Yeah, it's a longer reach than Dillashaw and a longer reach than Munhoz. So yeah, I'm right. Okay, good.
We didn't even see any glimmers of the kind of things that Sterling has been adding to his game in Lopez's last fight.
No, it would be purely just if range is all that's giving Assuncao problems.
Yeah. But in his last fight, like, again, he got hit a ton early and then took a guy down and fucking smashed him.
Yeah.
So, like, it was just exactly what he's been doing his whole career.
That brings us to Nate Marquardt versus Cezar Ferreira. And this is me, right? Yeah. Ferreira should win this just because Marquardt is kind of at the point where he's mostly checked out of fights. Like, unless a fight has clear opportunities for him to just leap in and land a bomb, he either stalls people in the clinch or he stalls out at range, and that's about it. And Ferreira is hurtable, certainly, so there's a chance Nate Marquardt lands that one shot. But otherwise, Ferreira, if he gets that slow pace that Marquardt likes, he is really pretty good at picking shots, at staying just busy enough to stay out ahead of somebody, and looking for those chances that one of the shots he lands will really hurt somebody without putting himself in any danger. Fights at a very defensive pace because of his chin and cardio. But it's a control, like, he's very good at controlling the kind of fight that Nate Marquardt wants to have.
Yeah. That's about it. I mean, Ferreira is he looks like a substantially better kickboxer when he's not being pressured.
Yeah.
He against Jack Hermanson, he was picking off some beautiful left hands and looked very aware of what was coming back at him because he had the space he wanted. He felt that he was controlling the distance. And then against like Elias Theodorou with like half as much threat as Hermanson was giving him with the strikes, still managed to just completely throw Ferreira off to the point where he was just like gassing and panicking and didn't know what to do. It's an interesting one in a way because Marquardt, like, if Ferreira fights super defensively, then Marquardt gets the range to be a tricky striker, albeit one who's probably not winning a ton of rounds, but definitely like an accurate, clever, an accurate knockout artist with clever setups who still has a lot of the speed and power that defined him as a younger fighter. And then if Ferreira does not give him that fight, then he might get countered by Marquardt. If Ferreira decides to try and press the wrestling a lot and get in there, then Marquardt will do the other thing he's been doing lately, which is just walking people into his right hand. And Marquardt did look solid. I thought in that fight with Vitor Belfort, I mean, granted, two old guys, but I thought both guys came out of that fight looking pretty good. It was a competitive kickboxing performance. Both guys had some good moments. But
it's the Stephan Bonner versus Tito Ortiz fight if they're actually in shape. Like, you know.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Nate Marquardt still has something to offer. I think he is still a very dangerous fighter, and that makes him uniquely dangerous for Cezar Ferreira, who is a particularly vulnerable fighter. But given Marquardt's slow-paced style, I have to agree. I think that he'll probably give Ferreira enough of the time he needs to set up his takedowns and land some little lacing shots, and otherwise just sort of avoid exchanges.
I mean, you have to look at the Sam Alvey fight too.
Yeah.
Where, you know, obviously Alvey has a better chin than Ferreira, but that wasn't the reason that Nate Marquardt did absolutely nothing in that fight. It was a slow-paced fight against somebody who has some danger to their game, which Ferreira does. And Marquardt was just like, I'm just going to watch. You know, I'll just wait from range. I'll wait in the clinch and whatever. And you can say, you know, he looked better in the Belfort fight, but a lot of that fight was still just that. It was still them watching each other from range, looking for those perfect, rare opportunities. And only potentially the fact that Vitor Belfort now fights at a slower pace than Sam Alvey, I think, let Marquardt look like he had more to offer in that fight.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Ferreira likes and understands how to create a slow pace, and Marquardt has not looked great in the last few years at changing that. You know, at taking the slow pace away from his opponents. In fact, I think he likes the slow pace just as much.
Odds on that fight, Nate Marquardt is a sizable underdog, opened at plus 115, adjusted up to plus 187, and sliding out now to plus 231. And Ferreira opened at minus 155, adjusted down to minus 218 or so, and now down to minus 287. That's pretty wide for somebody who's got as bad a chin as Ferreira does.
Yeah, it's a little wide for any glass-chinned fighter against Nate Marquardt.
Yeah.
Like, he has still been knocking fools out when they give him the chance to. So, are there any odds on a finish?
Let's see. Well, yeah, under 1.5 rounds, plus 170, over minus 200. See, Ferreira by TKO KO plus 255, Marquardt by TKO KO plus 550.
Plus 550. I mean, how else does Marquardt win this fight?
Yeah, he's not winning the decision. Let's see if there's just a fight ends inside the distance. Fight, you could just do fight starts won't start round 3 is plus 110, I guess. But yeah, Marquardt by TKO KO plus 550. That's interesting. Like I said, yeah, there's no other way Marquardt wins this.
Yeah. And there's really no other. Well, yeah, because there's no other way to bet on it because Ferreira is the obvious pick. But that has made him an unconscionably large favorite. Like, you should never trust Ferreira to the tune of minus 250 or whatever to beat a knockout puncher. Never. He's just too unreliable.
Anyway, that brings us now to the heavyweight bout. Andrei Arlovski, Junior Albini. Take it.
The one we've all been waiting for. Junior Albini is getting a quick rush, right? I think the UFC is now suddenly aware that they need like young heavyweight talent. So they are like finally bringing in fighters like Albini after just one impressive win in the UFC. But if you're going to bring in somebody to continue looking impressive, Andrei Arlovski is the elite heavyweight to do that against because he is just so extremely shaky. His chin is just not there. What's Arlovski's recent record even?
0-5.
There was the Tybura fight where he tried to do a lot more wrestling and tried to make it ugly, which I thought was the right idea. I think if he beats Albini here, it'll be doing something similar. It'll be trying to surprise him with a big burst of speed, or it'll be grinding him, trying to use the benefit of that experience to just tire him out.
To be really fair in the Tybura fight, he did both. He mostly was just getting out grappled by Tybura, but the fight was so exhausting within that round that he was able to finally shuck Tybura, and they stood up, and Arlovski just tried to blast him with hooks for 30 seconds straight before they both gassed out, and then the fight just turned into a wrestling mess.
But that strategy, I think, could work better against Albini. I don't have really a great idea of how comfortable he is defending takedowns, but on his record, there are a lot of submissions from the bottom, which does not seem like a good approach to use against an experienced heavyweight in Andrei Arlovski, especially one who can land serious power from top position if he does manage to get Albini down. And so down the stretch, if Arlovski can survive the first round, I'm going to be looking for him to try to drag Albini into that kind of fight and try to build up a lead as the fight goes on. Until he can manage to slow Albini down, he is going to be extremely vulnerable. Albini has very quick hands. He's very accurate. He's super confident in throwing his combinations. He puts his punches together quite well.
Also should be noticed, unlike Andrei Arlovski, who has a big chin that's easy to hit, Albini has no chin at all. So you can't you can't knock a guy out who doesn't have a chin to be knocked out with.
He definitely can be hit though, Albini, because he does like to throw those combinations. And so we may be in for some wild exchanges early, like a lot of Arlovski fights, some wild exchanges early, and then a dreadful slog as the fight continues. But I'm going to be optimistic. Well, I'm going to be pessimistic if you're Andrei Arlovski and say that I think Albini probably gets it done in one of those early exchanges and puts Arlovski away.
Yeah, I don't see enough of Arlovski, the wrestler, emerging when he's fresh and early in fights for me to think that he meaningfully changes that dynamic here.
Yeah.
And Albini,
something he falls into rather than
yeah. And Albini may not be more technical than Andrei Arlovski anywhere. But I don't know that really matters. He's accurate, he trusts his hands, and he lets them go with abandon, and he's durable, and that'll probably see him to a KO pretty early. Otherwise, yeah, if the fight goes more than a round, who knows? This could easily end up in some weird sluggish territory because, Arlovski's chin is bad, but it's literally always been bad. It is his chin has never been better than it is right now. So
his chin is at its best. It's just been a completely flat line throughout his 38 years as a human being.
It has. I mean,
you're right though. He has always been fragile. He has always been easy to knock out. He's been like Austro-Overeem.
Yep. So yeah, I'm picking Albini too. But
I just love the thought of this. Arlovski's chin has never been worse than it is now. Is such a depressing way to think of that.
It's true. I mean, he and Overeem, like, you can say whatever you want about, like, oh, like, he should retire, his chin's shot and all that. They have literally always been this chinny.
And if Arlovski is trying to make an even more impressive comeback a second time around, he is unfortunately well on his way, because I remember back in the day when I saw those 4 straight losses for Arlovski, and I was so sad, and I was like, I just wanted to retire. And then he came back and he looked great. Now he's 5 in a row.
Yeah. So it's going to be an even bigger comeback now.
God. I just don't want to see Arlovski fight anymore.
I know. But anyway,
I just want to be the muscle in movies.
Arlovski opened at plus 160, is now up to plus 268, pretty much drifting wider as long as the odds have been open. And Albini opened at minus 210, is now up to minus 342. Makes sense. I mean, I don't like to see heavyweight fights get that wide in the odds, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Welterweight bout. Matt Brown, co-main event now. Matt Brown, Diego Sanchez, and Matt Brown's going to knock Diego Sanchez out because Diego Sanchez still thinks that he can go out and box with people for more than 30 seconds at a time. That's about it. So that's my analysis.
There's a very clear route to there's a route at least to begin victory for Diego Sanchez just by wrestling Matt Brown.
Yeah, sure.
It is something that he could do, and it would probably be fairly effective. Brown's wrestling's a lot better than it used to be, and his grappling is not that bad. It's pretty solid, in fact.
Sanchez is still a top-shelf wrestle grappler. Yeah,
that's his game, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know it at all. He's going to go out there and try to throw hands. He's going to make mean faces, and Matt Brown's going to hit him in one of those mean faces and probably knock him out.
Yeah, that's really all you need to say here. Brown can still take like 3 or 4 flush head kicks from Donald Cerrone before getting knocked out. And, and
he's got a shitload more power than some of the other guys who have been dropping Diego Sanchez. Matt Brown hits very hard.
Sanchez going up to welterweight for this bout does not inspire any confidence in me.
God damn. Why is he doing that?
Because he can't be told. He can't be told anything.
Somebody made the mistake of saying, well, at least Diego isn't going to welterweight, and that's what prompted him to do it?
Yeah, probably. All right. Matt Brown is a large favorite, opened at minus 260, dropped down to minus 308, now at minus 347. Diego Sanchez opened at plus 180, adjusted up to plus 250, and is now at plus 269. So it's pretty simple on that one. It could frankly be wider the way Diego Sanchez looked in his fight against. I realize that's Diego Sanchez's actual second KO loss, but the way he's looked in both those losses, and even the way Marcin Held was tagging him up before he decided to grapple with Diego Sanchez. Like, you also have to realize that was not a Diego Sanchez initiated plan.
Yeah.
That was a Marcin Held initiated plan that saw him out grappled by Diego Sanchez.
He repeatedly decided to grapple with Diego Sanchez.
Yeah. Jim Miller was tagging him up early but he had Lyme disease at the time. And yeah.
Basically anybody with the wherewithal and the desire to go at Diego Sanchez early and hit him in the face is able to do so.
Yeah. So all right, that brings us to our final bout, the main event lightweight fight, Dustin Poirier versus Anthony Pettis. And this is you, yeah. So break it down.
I could tell Zane was raring up for something good there.
I'll wait.
It's a good fight. It's a very intriguing fight. Anthony Pettis looked very solid against Jim Miller, although I think that a lot of that was Jim Miller having a hard time executing, like the strategy he needed to execute to win that fight. I think if Jim Miller was going to concede to back up and be pressured, then Anthony Pettis was always going to beat him. So I'm still like in the same situation, thinking like Anthony Pettis is making small improvements. He is gaining the benefit of experience with each passing bout, but he is still losing a step and is still a fighter who got by for a long time with a lot of fundamental skills missing from his game. Dustin Poirier is headed in very much the opposite direction. He is a guy who has been working on building a more technical and well-rounded game for the past several years. We have seen glimmers of his true insane brawler self come out when opponents are able to drag it out of him. But I'm not sold. Well, Anthony Pettis might be able to drag that out of Dustin Poirier. Because the thing, I say this a lot, but it bears repeating. The most underappreciated aspect of Anthony Pettis as a fighter is his toughness.
Yeah.
He is extremely tough. And if you can't put him away, he is willing to exchange. He's willing to throw down. I think he's probably losing a little bit of that with age and wear and tear, like the Max Holloway fight, the Rafael dos Anjos fight, the Edson Barboza fight. His losses lately have not been easy. He's been taking a lot of punishment in all of those losses.
Mm-hmm.
But he can still take a lot of punishment. And so the question here for me really is Dustin Poirier, who I assume will have some success pressuring, who I assume will do the smart thing, like ATT fighters usually do, and make Pettis back up, refuse him the kicking distance. The question I have is, can Dustin Poirier do that? And when Anthony Pettis is forced to exchange with him, does Dustin Poirier go wild? Does he waste his energy? Does he jump on sloppy takedowns thinking he has to mix things up and get guillotined? Does he think he has to wrestle at all? And is it really even a good idea to go to the ground with Pettis when he can sort of clinch with him and light him up against the fence? I think the answer is probably that Dustin Poirier can stay disciplined enough to win a decision if he needs to in this fight. I think he's going to pressure. I think when he gets pressured, Anthony Pettis is just half the fighter he is when he's in open space or coming forward. And I think more than anything, Poirier's clinch skills are going to come in super handy here because he is going to try to put Pettis against the fence. He doesn't want Pettis to be able to just square up and throw bombs like he does when he's cornered. So he's going to have to tie him up. And that is where Pettis has stuck a lot of people who want to take him down, but he's not himself a phenomenal clinch fighter. He's not a super active striker in the clinch. Poirier is. Poirier is really dangerous with his hands, his knees, everything when he's inside. So I'm going with Dustin Poirier here.
I don't feel like I can trust Dustin Poirier or I don't feel I can trust Dustin Poirier's game or durability over 5 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it comes down to for me.
Oh, I think he finishes Pettis, I should say. That's why I think that's why I'm picking him. If he can't finish Pettis, then there's a very good chance that Pettis, just through sheer durability, has the advantage down the stretch.
Yeah, because I'm like, especially that fight with Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard not to look at that and see an even more hittable Eddie Alvarez, and even easier in that way for Poirier to land his shots fight. And I realize that Eddie Alvarez is, the underground king and is a much different fighter in terms of digging deep and like coming back with pressure than Anthony Pettis. But the way that turned against Poirier, it just like it makes me feel like given a high stakes, high power firefight like that, Poirier can't stick out his game.
Yeah. Here's a question. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because I can't recall. Has Anthony Pettis ever... We have seen his toughness. We've seen him stick out difficult spots. Has he ever come back to win a fight after actually being hurt? Like being knocked down, being staggered? Has he ever come back to win a fight after like a big moment that takes the momentum away from him? I think he has. I
think he was hurt in his Gilbert Melendez fight, or like, if not hurt, really like nailed. Maybe not hurt.
Yeah, I mean, he was corralled, he was trapped, and he had to start swinging. Like he was forced to exchange. But has he ever has someone ever hit him like Holloway did or like Dos Anjos did? Because that was the big thing in the Poirier Alvarez fight, is that Poirier had Alvarez like dead in his sights. He had him
Yeah.
hurt and wobbled, and that's how he got drawn into that war.
True.
If he hurts Anthony Pettis, can Anthony Pettis fight back then the way Eddie Alvarez did?
That's a good point.
I don't know. It's just a question because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, Anthony Pettis, like, well, the thing is that it's so rare that he ever gets hurt. You know?
Yeah, I have a niggling feeling that we're reaching the days where we can no longer say that about Anthony Pettis.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's a decade into his career, and most fighters start to see the cracks at that point. But yeah, I don't know. The way Poirier fights over 5 rounds, it just does not. I don't know. I just don't trust it that he can keep safe and that he can keep himself. Like, I don't think that if he has to turn this into a wrestling grappling match that he can stay safe enough on top necessarily. Anthony Pettis' grappling game really is incredibly underrated. And if he has to walk through shots, if he has to get hit hard over and over again, I don't trust him to stick with his striking game.
Mm-hmm. Or even if he does, like, he might lose discipline and start striking wildly or wasting energy or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
I don't know, though, because he's also, like, he's really trying to change the way he works his strikes. And what it's really about is, the big, like, Dustin Poirier's striking game is, like, the double right-hand jab and then look for big left hands. And it's a ton, and body kicks, left body kicks. And there's a ton built around that. And he's trying to bite back on the double jab and, like, keep from lunging way in on it, because it used to be, even just like going back to the Michael Johnson fight where he got knocked out, that he would just really overcommit on his lead hand and kind of throw himself into the pocket behind his strikes.
Mm-hmm.
And it would get him into situations where he had to be a wild fighter, where he had to open up and he had to give up his defense. And he's trying to really pull back on that. And you saw it especially coming to fruition in the Eddie Alvarez fight, where he looked great early. But it's just how much can he keep that, and how much can he keep himself from getting picked off? And
it's a tricky conundrum too, because exchanging short punches inside is probably what Dustin Poirier is best at.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, like, where he is the most vulnerable to having his chin checked. So
yeah,
he's having to not only convince himself to learn a new, like, he's not only learn a new style, but he's learning one that's sort of the antithesis to what he is really, I think, wants to do on a certain level.
So I'm picking Pettis just to hurt Poirier and to change the game enough at some point to either stop him or to turn this fight into something that just does not function for Poirier, to turn it into, like, a range battle where Poirier is stuck just trading pot shots outside with Pettis.
Mm-hmm.
And stuck with Pettis' creativity and speed there. But I don't trust it. It's a tough fight.
Or if you can chew up his legs, if Poirier is at range, if he can mess him up the way Miller did, like, Pettis is super dangerous if he can force his opponent to shoot.
Yeah.
Any point at which Poirier feels that he's starting to lose on the feet, Pettis instantly has the opportunist advantage in those circumstances, because his guillotine alone is a very effective takedown counter to somebody who is just desperately shooting without, really worrying about their neck. I don't know. It's an interesting sort of crossroads fight, but I kind of like it. Like, it's a fascinating matchup because it's very difficult to know where each guy is, but both guys clearly still have a lot to offer. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, Poirier's weirdly become, like, Poirier has become a more elite fighter than I thought he would necessarily ever quite be.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
He's
got more
developing, man.
power. He's always had more power than people give him credit for. But when he gets stopped, it tends to be stopped hard. And his game, like, it's always been this sort of like the better brawler because he has more power, and that's slowly shifted over time. And we're seeing the fruition of that, but it's still like the fruition of that still comes with a bad knockout loss to Michael Johnson.
Yeah, it's worth saying though that like the people who knocked Dustin Poirier out or hurt him they're hitters,
Yeah.
Michael Johnson, Conor McGregor, and Eric Koch hurt him, and so did Chan Sung Jung. But these are people with power. These are people who have a lot of weight in their hands.
Which is also Anthony Pettis.
True. Yeah. Right. Like, he's not like the most fragile guy in the world, but he's there to be hit by people who believe in their hands,
Yeah. I'm going to pick Pettis for now, but it's a tough fight.
A lot of dissent on this card between the two of us.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, there's a lot on this card that, there's some old dogs in bad fights. And some action, but there's a lot of fun action fighters. There's a lot of well-matched fights on this that I'm.
It's a strong card,
so
and I think there are a lot of them where we both feel like we understand the fight, but who wins it is still up in the air, which means it should be pretty entertaining viewing because, yeah, we have compelling style matchups with uncertain outcomes. We don't have a lot of like people being set up for easy wins, except for Matt Brown.
Yeah, except for Matt Brown. Anthony Pettis opened at -140, adjusted up to -107, and back down to -118, is now at -119. A bit of a spike late in him, back towards even odds. And Dustin Poirier opened at +110, has adjusted up and down to -103. Adjusted up to went up to +104 at one point, jumped up, and is now dipped back down again to -104. So this is trending towards a pick'em fight, which I'm totally fine with.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too.
All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at @TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com, DOTCOM. Give us a like on YouTube. That's the thumbs up thing down there. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's MMANation.com, DOTCOM. Did I already say that for Bloody Elbow? I keep doing that now because I've gotten so used to running through this whole thing way too fast. Obviously, don't go to bloodyelbow.com, just .com's fine. MMANation.com, DOTCOM. That's our YouTube channel. So you get all the latest Bloody Elbow shows, videos, news, analysis. We will be back next week for UFC Fight Night. Verdum versus Tabura in Sydney, Australia. A interesting, odd kind of local card. There's some fun fights on there. There's a lot of just stuff where the UFC has booking obligations to get through and local guys to match up. So
should be the subtitle for the card. UFC Sydney, booking obligations.
And stay tuned, of course, for the MMA, for the Care Don't Care, If I Did It, Heavy Hands, all that stuff we do week in, week out. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.